The quiet hum of the starship echoed throughout the vast conference hall as the alien leaders, representatives from various galactic species, stared down at the human delegation across the table. They had expected little in the way of resistance when they arrived to discuss the fate of the human colony on Volta 7, a rich planet recently settled by humans on the fringes of known space. To these intergalactic elites, it was a simple matter of resource allocation. The colony had something they wanted: raw materials needed to fuel their interstellar expansion. The humans, with their small primitive technologies, were an afterthought. But as the negotiation wore on, something was amiss. The humans, who should have been docile, grateful for the opportunity to speak at all, were not submitting. Instead, their representative, Captain Eleanor Hayes, stood her ground with quiet defiance. Her eyes, sharp and unyielding, met the gazes of the alien leaders, challenging them with a silent strength. The aliens exchanged glances, some with amusement, others with disdain. "You do not understand the gravity of the situation," the leader of the coalition of Zorith, a towering insectoid creature named Qatar, hissed. "We have come to collect what is rightfully ours, human. Your colony is a blemish on this sector. Your primitive ways must give way to progress. If you resist, the consequences will be dire." Captain Hayes, her fingers tapping lightly on the table, raised an eyebrow. "Consequences," she repeated softly, her voice steady. "You may have the firepower to intimidate us, Qatar, but I'm not here to negotiate out of fear. My people will not bow to anyone." Her words hung in the air, and for a brief moment, a chilling silence settled over the room. The alien leaders looked to one another, stunned. They had heard of human persistence, of their stubbornness, but none of them truly understood what that meant. They were creatures of reason, of strategy, of centuries-old protocol. Humans, however, had something far more dangerous: an unpredictable, often chaotic nature, and the relentless will to survive. Tar growled in irritation, his antennae twitching. "You misunderstand. This will not be a choice. We will take your resources, we will take your world, and we will destroy anyone who stands in our way." The human delegation, however, did not flinch. A silent fury began to stir within them, a fury that had been simmering for years, decades even. It wasn't just about the colony. It was about something deeper, something the aliens could not comprehend. The fierce protection of a people who had been driven to the edge, the rage of a species who had suffered long enough. Captain Hayes stood taller, her voice rising, carrying a weight that cut through the tension like a blade. "Then you will learn that we will fight. And when we fight with everything." The first spark was lit. It was subtle, unnoticed by most. But the universe was about to learn the true cost of underestimating humans. The initial shock of Captain Hayes' defiance was just the beginning. On the surface of Volta 7, life continued as usual, small human settlements growing in the harsh terrain, bound together by the promise of a new future. But the alien coalition had underestimated something fundamental: the resilience of humanity when faced with what they held most precious. In the weeks following the confrontation, whispers spread through the colony. The first attack came not in the form of intergalactic warships, but through the eyes of every human on the planet. As Qatar's threat echoed through the corridors of power, the humans had begun to prepare. They knew their odds, but they also knew one thing the aliens did not: how to fight when the stakes were personal. Within days, a resistance formed. It wasn't a formal military at first. It wasn't a grand coalition of well-trained soldiers. It was ordinary humans, farmers, miners, technicians, who understood the land and their technology better than anyone could predict. The resistance did not sit idly waiting for an attack. They began to make preparations quietly, utilizing what little they had in ways that the aliens would never have expected. Among them was a former military strategist, Captain Hayes' right-hand man, Lieutenant Eric Novak. He was a tactical genius, but what made him dangerous was his ability to think outside the rigid structures of conventional warfare. As the first alien patrol ships began to arrive in Volta 7's orbit, Novak activated the newly improvised defense network, a patchwork of old satellites and energy-based weaponry they had scavenged from scrap yards. The first clash was brief but violent. The aliens had expected a small skirmish, a token resistance, at best. What they got was an ambush. The makeshift energy beams hit their ships with incredible precision, causing massive damage and throwing the alien forces into disarray. The humans, with their anger and adrenaline fueling their every move, struck without warning, in ways the alien fleet had no defense against. The ships were forced to retreat, leaving the humans with their first victory, an unexpected, bold message to the galaxy. Humanity was not to be taken lightly. Across the galaxy, news of the human resistance spread quickly, creating a ripple of uncertainty among the coalition of Zoreth. Alien leaders exchanged worried transmissions, their arrogance shaken for the first time in centuries. It was one thing to crush a few primitive colonies. It was another to fight a species that could think on its feet, that could turn anger into action. But it wasn't just the alien fleet that was on edge. Among the galaxy's more neutral species, some began to reconsider their stance. Quietly, factions who had previously seen the humans as a nuisance began to take notice. Could they afford to ignore what was unfolding? As the humans' fury spread like wildfire, the alien coalition scrambled to respond, but they were already facing something they hadn't planned for. A species driven by rage, fear, and the deep desire for justice. The universe now knew something was different. Humans weren't just fighting for survival. They were fighting with everything they had, in ways that defied logic. And it was starting to feel like the calm, predictable galaxy was no longer in control. The victory on Vulture 7 sent shockwaves across the galaxy. The coalition of Zoreth, wounded and humiliated, called for a full-scale response, sending an armada of warships to crush the rebellious human colony. But the humans were far from unprepared. With every passing day, their ingenuity surged. In the wake of their initial ambush, the resistance began to build something no one expected. A weapon, one that could shift the tide of the war entirely. The weapon was a fusion of human resourcefulness and desperation, cobbled together from scraps and salvage technology. It wasn't the product of a highly advanced research lab. It was a product of human will. The Resistance's scientists, led by a brilliant but unassuming engineer named Dr. Sofia Alvarez, worked tirelessly day and night. Their goal was simple: to create a weapon powerful enough to hold off the incoming alien forces. It was an audacious plan, one that no alien intelligence could have foreseen, a hybrid energy weapon capable of destabilizing the energy shields of even the most advanced ships. The human engineers had reverse-engineered alien technology captured in previous skirmishes, adapting their findings to create a device that harnessed the raw, unfiltered fury of human emotion. They theorized that by tapping into the neural energies of humans during moments of intense anger or fear, they could create an energy pulse unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. The weapon, a sleek, compact cannon designed for human soldiers, would channel these emotional surges directly into devastating energy blasts. As the first test of the new weapon neared, Captain Hayes and Lieutenant Novak gathered their forces at a hidden base on the outskirts of the colony. Their goal was clear: to stop the approaching armada before it reached Vulture 7. The Resistance fighters were nervous, but Hayes's unshakable confidence rallied them. She knew this weapon could be their only chance to make a stand. The first shot fired by the new weapon was an explosion of energy that seemed to tear through the fabric of space itself. The blast hit a distant scouting ship, disintegrating it instantly. It was as if the weapon had awakened something deep within the universe, something primal. The energy pulse rippled through the space around it, short-circuiting the alien ship's energy shield before obliterating its hull. The blast was pure, raw, and furious. An embodiment of human rage turned into a weapon of cosmic scale. News of the test spread fast, and the first rumblings of panic began to rise within the alien ranks. The galaxy had been thrown off balance. What were once considered simple creatures were now wielding a force that seemed beyond comprehension. The coalition of Zorith, shaken by the display, began to consider new strategies, their arrogance giving way to fear. Humanity had revealed something they never intended to, not just the capacity to survive, but the ability to strike with such overwhelming power that the galaxy itself had started to tremble. The universe would never see humanity the same way again. The human victory at Volta 7 had been only the beginning, but it was enough to send shockwaves across the galaxy. With their new weapon in hand, the Resistance had gained a new sense of purpose, and the coalition of Zorith, once confident in their superiority, now found themselves facing an enemy that refused to bend. The Armada, which had initially been dispatched to crush humanity's defiance, now found itself in a race against time. The aliens had underestimated one key thing: humanity's relentless determination when pushed to the edge. Weeks passed as Captain Hayes, Lieutenant Novak, and the human resistance continued to strengthen their positions across the planet. They'd fortified their defenses, built underground bunkers, and scavenged the remains of downed alien ships for parts. What they didn't have in numbers, they made up for in creativity and an unwavering will to survive. But the coalition was coming, and their ships, immense, intimidating, were approaching fast. The humans' new weapon, still untested on a large scale, was their only hope. The Resistance was fully aware that this would be their last stand. Once the full force of the alien armada arrived, there would be no turning back. The fight for Volta 7 was about to become a fight for humanity's very existence. As the first wave of alien ships entered Volta 7's orbit, the humans made their move. The air was thick with tension, every fighter on edge, every mind sharpened by the gravity of the situation. Then, as the aliens began to make their descent, the first strike came from the humans. They fired their newly crafted energy weapons, small, concentrated blasts of raw fury, into the approaching ships. It was a calculated move, a way to test the limits of their weapons' power, and it hit harder than anyone had imagined. One of the alien ships, a massive destroyer that had been tasked with leading the invasion, was hit directly by a pulse of energy so intense that it caused a massive explosion, sending debris scattering in all directions. The alien forces were unprepared for the level of destruction, and panic spread among them. The humans had struck a blow they hadn't anticipated, and it sent a ripple of fear throughout the ranks of the coalition. But the aliens, prideful and powerful, were not easily defeated. A second wave of ships appeared, this time more strategic, more cautious. They launched missiles and energy blasts at the humans' defenses, trying to neutralize them before the fight could escalate further. The skies over Volta 7 were filled with chaos, fire, smoke, and flashes of energy as both sides fought with everything they had. It was here, amid the chaos, that humanity's true power began to show. Every time the aliens advanced, they were met with human ingenuity and unpredictable tactics. The humans adapted to every move the aliens made, using their surroundings, their environment, and their raw fury to their advantage. The tide of the battle began to shift. What had once seemed like an inevitable victory for the alien coalition now seemed uncertain. Humanity wasn't just surviving, it was pushing back. The Resistance, led by a handful of brave soldiers, had become a force the galaxy had never seen. No one had expected the human spirit to burn this brightly, to fuel a war that had only just begun. The universe, for the first time, began to understand. Humanity was not a force to be underestimated. The battle for Volta 7 raged on, a brutal clash of wills and technology that stretched the limits of both sides. The alien armada, once confident in its ability to wipe out the human resistance with ease, was now struggling to hold its ground. Every time they thought they had the upper hand, humanity adapted, using terrain, improvisation, and above all, the raw fury of their will to survive. The human forces were relentless, fueled by an unyielding belief that they had something to protect. This was no longer just a fight for survival. It was a fight for their place in the galaxy. Amid the chaos, the Resistance uncovered something that could tip the scales in their favor. An ancient alien artifact buried beneath the surface of Volta 7, long forgotten by the galaxy's more advanced species. The artifact was unlike anything humanity had ever encountered. A relic from an extinct race of beings, it pulsed with strange, incomprehensible energy. The Resistance had no idea what it could do, but they knew it had to be important. Dr. Sofia Alvarez and the team of engineers quickly set to work deciphering its secrets, the hope that it could provide an edge over their alien adversaries growing by the hour. Days passed as they carefully examined the artifact's inner workings. It wasn't just a weapon. It was something far more complex, something that resonated with human emotions. The artifact was capable of amplifying neural energy, emotions, thoughts, and impulses, and turning them into raw power. In a moment of clarity, Dr. Alvarez realized what they had stumbled upon. The artifact was capable of tapping into the very thing that had made humanity a force to be reckoned with, their emotions. It was no longer just a matter of human rage being harnessed in a weapon. It was a way to amplify their deepest, most primal emotions into a focused energy. It was like channeling pure fury and turning it into a cosmic force. If they could control it, they could harness an overwhelming power capable of obliterating the alien forces. But the risks were immense. The artifact's power was unpredictable, and tapping into such raw emotion had the potential to backfire. If the humans couldn't control the energy, it could tear them apart, physically and mentally. But there was no time to hesitate. The alien forces were closing in. The final battle for Volta 7 was imminent. With a collective resolve, the Resistance made their decision. The artifact was activated, its energy pulsing like a heartbeat beneath the surface of the planet. As human soldiers linked their minds to the artifact, the waves of emotion surged through them. Fear, rage, and hope, all amplified and channeled into an intense, focused blast of energy. The humans let go of their doubts, letting the raw fury of their fight flow through them. When the first wave of energy erupted from the artifact, it was as if the universe itself recoiled. A massive burst of light and power shot through the skies, tearing apart alien ships in its wake, disintegrating them with an intensity that no technology had ever matched. The blast sent shockwaves across the battlefield, shaking both the Resistance and the invaders. The aliens, stunned and unprepared for such a force, faltered. The tide of battle had shifted, and the universe had witnessed something it had never expected. The unleashing of a human force that defied the natural order, powered by emotions that no one had imagined could reshape the galaxy. Fear was no longer just a feeling. It had become a reality for the invaders, and humanity had just become the most dangerous force in the universe. The explosion of energy from the artifact reverberated throughout the battlefield, and for the first time since the humans had stood their ground, the alien forces were reeling. The massive fleet of the coalition of Zoreth, which had been so sure of their victory, had been caught off guard by a power they couldn't understand and couldn't defend against. The air crackled with the aftershocks of the blast as entire ships, some the size of moons, were ripped apart in the blink of an eye. Alien vessels disintegrated, their shields overwhelmed, their hulls collapsing in on themselves. The ground beneath Volta 7 trembled, as if the planet itself recognized the shift in power. For the first time in this war, the humans had gained the upper hand. But it was only a temporary victory. The aliens, shaken but not broken, quickly regrouped. The Zoreth Coalition's leaders understood one thing that the humans did not. They had underestimated their enemy, but they were not so easily defeated. The humans had tapped into something powerful, yes, but so too had the Zoreth. Their vast network of allies, ancient technologies, and war strategies had been built over centuries, and they would adapt. In the wake of the attack, the Zoreth leaders called for an emergency summit, and the galaxy held its breath. What had once seemed like a simple military conquest was rapidly turning into a galactic crisis. If the coalition couldn't stop humanity now, what would happen next? Would the humans continue to escalate, driven by emotions they themselves didn't fully control? The possibility that this wild, unpredictable species might spiral into uncontrollable destruction was a fear no one could ignore. On Vulture 7, Captain Hayes and Lieutenant Novik gathered with the leaders of the human resistance, their faces drawn, knowing the battle was far from over. They had struck a blow, but would it be enough to turn the tide for good? Would they be able to harness the artifact's power without losing themselves in the process? These were questions no one had answers for. However, what was becoming undeniable was that humanity's unyielding spirit had caught the attention of the galaxy. More and more alien factions began to take notice. Some saw the humans as a potential ally, one that could shift the balance of power in their favor. Others, however, saw them as a threat, something to be eradicated before they could fully realize their power. But there was no denying one truth. Humanity had now entered the galactic stage, and the universe would never be the same. As the alien coalition readied its counterattack, humans stood firm. The resistance, strengthened by the knowledge that they had the power to shake the very foundations of the galaxy, rallied together. They no longer fought just for survival. They fought for a new future, one where they could no longer be ignored or oppressed. The first real test of humanity's resolve was upon them. And as the sky above Vulture 7 darkened with the approach of the second wave of invaders, it became clear that this battle would be the defining moment. The universe had seen fear before, but it had never seen anything like this. The air over Vulture 7 was thick with tension as the second wave of the coalition ships loomed large on the horizon. The alien fleet had regrouped, but the damage they'd sustained was significant. Despite the casualties, the coalition was not about to retreat. Their pride had been wounded, and that made them dangerous. The sheer size of the incoming force dwarfed the human resistance, but the humans had something the aliens didn't: desperation and an unbreakable resolve. Captain Hayes stood on the command deck, watching the holographic displays flicker with incoming data. The resistance had grown stronger since the first wave, but so had the alien forces. The humans had only one advantage now: their unpredictable tactics and the artifact, still pulsing with power. Yet, even as they prepared for their final defense, doubt crept into the hearts of many. Would the artifact's energy continue to work in their favor, or would it destroy them before it destroyed the enemy? "We can't let them land," Lieutenant Novik said, his voice low but steady. "If they take the surface, they'll overwhelm us. Our only hope is to keep them in space, where we can hit them with everything we have." The plan was simple but brutal. Use every available weapon to keep the alien ships off Vulture 7's surface. The humans knew that the artifact could be their last line of defense, but they had to ensure it wasn't wasted. They couldn't afford to make any mistakes. The stakes were higher than ever, and each decision would weigh heavily on the outcome of the battle. The alien fleet advanced, their ships cutting through the atmosphere with terrifying speed. As the first of the enemy ships descended toward the planet, human fighters launched into the air, streaking toward the invading vessels with precision. The space around Vulture 7 became a storm of blinding light, energy blasts, and explosions. The humans, outnumbered but fierce, fought with everything they had, desperate to hold the line. In the midst of the chaos, Dr. Alvarez stood in the control center, her fingers trembling as she adjusted the artifact settings. The human soldiers were relying on her work. Their survival depended on whether she could control the weapon long enough to unleash its power at the right moment. She had never felt more alone, but she knew that failure wasn't an option. As she activated the artifact, the familiar hum of energy filled the room. Then, without warning, the artifact's energy surged beyond their control. It was as though the very fabric of reality strained under the weight of the emotions it was amplifying. Fear, anger, and desperation coiled together in a maelstrom that nearly shattered the Resistance's own resolve. The artifact, once a symbol of hope, now threatened to turn into their greatest danger. But in that moment, as the universe seemed to tremble under the force of the artifact's power, the humans made a choice. They would either control it, or it would control them. And as the power of the artifact exploded outward, the human resolve held steady, focused on one singular purpose: survival. The energy blast shot into space with blinding intensity, and the alien ships, caught in its path, were obliterated in an instant. The Resistance had managed to wield the power of the artifact, not without cost, but with a victory that sent a clear message to the rest of the galaxy. The universe now knew what humans were truly capable of. The remnants of the alien armada drifted silently in the vacuum of space. What had once been an overwhelming force, poised to crush humanity, had been shattered in the blink of an eye by the sheer ferocity of human willpower. The artifact's energy, a weapon of unimaginable destructive power, had turned the tide of battle in favor of the Resistance. Vulture 7, though scared and battered, stood defiantly under the twin suns of its system, its people united as never before. On the surface, the survivors of the Resistance gathered, their faces filled with disbelief. They had done it. Against all odds, they had repelled the invaders. Captain Hayes stood before the crowd, her hands resting on the hilt of her weapon, her gaze focused on the horizon. The weight of their victory hung heavy, but so did the burden of what they had done. The artifact, while victorious, had come at a cost. Its power was unpredictable, its consequences unknown. But for now, they had no choice but to revel in their triumph. "We've done the impossible," Hayes said, her voice carrying across the crowd. "But this is only the beginning. We've shown the galaxy that we will not be erased, that we will fight for our future. The universe will remember today." The sounds of cheering and celebration rose around her, but there was an underlying sense of caution. The humans had won, but the cost was not just the lives lost or the alien fleet shattered. The artifact's power had left a deep mark on their world, and as the galaxy turned its eyes toward humanity, the question remained: what would happen next? News of the human victory spread like wildfire across the galaxy. The coalition of Zoreth, bruised and humiliated, retreated, but the damage had been done. Their superiority was shattered, and in its place, a new kind of fear began to grow. No longer were humans seen as primitive, weak creatures. They were a force to be reckoned with. But not everyone was afraid of them. Across the stars, other species began to see the humans in a new light. Some, wary of their potential for destruction, began to distance themselves from the coalition. Others, seeing the humans' strength and resolve, offered their alliances, eager to align with a species that had proven it could take on even the most powerful forces in the galaxy. Humans, for the first time, stood at the center of galactic politics, not as pawns, but as kings and queens in their own right. The days that followed were filled with rebuilding, but also with the uncertainty of what lay ahead. Captain Hayes knew that this victory would not be the last. The universe had been changed, and humanity had become a force that could not be ignored. But with this power came responsibility, and the artifact's potential remained an open question. Would they be able to control it? Or would they, like the aliens before them, fall victim to their own creations? The future was unwritten, but humanity, now fully aware of its own strength, would write it in their own image. The universe had learned fear, but it had also learned something deeper: that humanity was a force not to be underestimated, and a power that, when unleashed, would change the stars forever.